Now, tabletop games, or just miniature painting in general, has recently seen a boom in popularity, partially thanks to the pandemic and also by word of mouth. Be it either by chance, one of your favorite VTubers or content creators started to get interested in tabletop games, the king of the nerds Henry Cavill, or in the case of Warhammer, he recently played Space Marine 2. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Warhammer and this channel is predominantly a Warhammer channel, but with each year that passes, it just gets more and more frustrating to play and collect Warhammer with the constant price increases, rules that can change at the drop of a hat, the short edition cycles, throwing minis into Legends that frankly don't need to due to some rumored beef each game design department of GW has with each other, and frankly, the list goes on, but that's a subject for another video, or multiple videos for that matter. So I figured with the release of the BattleTech Kickstarter, I should probably destroy my channel's algorithm. I mean, finally talk about BattleTech because that's actually my first tabletop game. But yeah, it's me, Revan/Handy, Destroy All Wallets, maker of terrible financial decisions, back with another video that hopefully might convince you to give BattleTech a try. So I'm sure you're wondering, how exactly did I first get interested in BattleTech? Well, let's go back in time for story time with Grandpa to when I was younger and more financially responsible. Now, there were a few game stores relatively close to my house when I was younger that captivated me with all the cool miniatures at the time. I honestly had no idea these minis were painstakingly painted by those that played, and sadly, some of those stores didn't make it to when I first started to really dive into tabletop games. I was at least somewhat aware that these tabletop games existed, although most of what I vaguely knew was either Warhammer, Dungeons & Dragons, or some of the historical war games that sadly have faded from existence. But, you know, being young and all, I was more interested in Legos or model trains, and if I'm gonna be honest, nothing's really changed. Some of you may think that I started my tabletop journey with Warhammer and the Warlord Titan, which was my first miniature, but it actually all started at a Costco, go figure, in 2003, and a game on the original Xbox called Mechassault. For young me, this game was just awesome. I knew nothing about the BattleTech universe or the fact until much later that you'll get burned at the stake for saying you liked this game. But for young me, it's what triggered my love for BattleTech and just giant robots in general. And of course, yes, I can't talk about giant robots without mentioning Megas XLR. The more I played Mechassault, the more I wanted some of these mechs. And inside that game case was a small piece of paper with an advertisement for a new tabletop war game called MechWarrior Dark Age, a ready-to-play variant of BattleTech for those not too keen on miniature painting. So I did what any kid would do, beg my parents to go out on an adventure to the various game stores near us to see if we can find them. And we eventually found it one day at a Hobbytown USA in the back corner of the store on a small shelf with all the other tabletop games. What young me didn't know was that these were gacha boxes with anywhere from 90 to 160 minis in any given set. So there went any hope of getting an Atlas or a Timberwolf, because not only were there mechs in these, but also vehicles and power armor too. So honestly, the rest is really history. Fast forward to today, and I still love BattleTech. But now that story time with Grandpa is over, it's time for a brief history of BattleTech. BattleTech first started back in the 1980s under the FASA Corporation and was created by Jordan Weissman and L. Ross Babcock III, originally by the name of Battle Droids, which was later renamed to BattleTech. It got so popular and successful for FASA that eventually it got numerous game expansions, novels, RPGs, a card game. Today I learned. And also a television series that was so cheesy it's now canon in universe as Inner Sphere propaganda. Explaining BattleTech is kinda weird. A lot of people ask if it's a sci-fi simulator game. Well, the best way I've seen a lot of people explain it that I frankly find hilarious and agree with is that BattleTech is a historical war game set in a time that doesn't exist yet, or just Game of Thrones in space. So replace dragons with battle mechs, and then you have the most powerful war machines that man has ever created. Mechs from the Inner Sphere are pretty much the old workhorses that just refuse to die, while clan mechs are the newer mechs on the block that are much more efficient than their counterparts, until we get much later into the timeline, which I'm not going to explain because I know my audience. But if you want to learn more about the lore, like Warhammer, there are tons of lore videos on YouTube you can watch, or you could read one of the many BattleTech novels. Oh my god, it's almost as bad as Warhammer. Now, I think I've kept you waiting long enough and you want the answer to the most important question: what about the miniatures in game? Unlike Warhammer, if you exclude the cost of paint, the barrier to entry is anywhere from $25 to $80, with the starter boxes obviously being the most expensive. And this also honestly depends on where you buy it from. The mechs come in 3 forms: the classic pewter miniatures, cardboard cutouts, or the newer plastic sculpts. And also, yes, I know if you want to go this route, 3D printing also is a thing. Most of the pewter sculpts are made by Ironwood Metals. These are the classic mech designs, with more of the newer designs also being made. Then what most of the newer players will know is either the cardboard cutouts from the starter boxes or the plastic minis from the multiple Battle Force boxes. The quality of the plastic minis isn't GW quality, but for the price they're honestly worth it. And the quality with each new Kickstarter that passes only gets better. But if I were to calculate how much I've spent on my entire BattleTech collection, for all this it would probably be around $350 to $400. And if I'm gonna be honest, this is way more than enough to play with. All of it is enough to have multiple lances or stars of mechs from different factions, but I'm just gonna stick with my old MechWarrior online mercenary company Comstar Regulars colors, which is just an offshoot of House Steiner. Like I mentioned earlier, you can also get 3D printed mechs because Catalyst Games Labs still has a huge backlog of mechs to make. And when I say huge backlog of mechs to make, it honestly puts Warhammer to shame. So if you do or don't have a 3D printer, check out the various 3D printing file websites or eBay, because there are plenty of mech designs if you want to go that route. I mean, I do it because there are some designs I don't really vibe with, like the new Annihilator, or it doesn't exist in plastic yet, like the Bull Shark. But a starter box like the new Mercenaries one will contain everything you need to play, like the data sheets, data cards for Alpha Strike, the paper playmat, dice, rules, and of course the mechs. Honestly, if you want to try BattleTech, just get a starter box. The Mercenaries box was a part of the most recent Kickstarter, so it might be a while before it's sold at a game store near you, but you can pick up a game of Armored Combat or the Clan Invasion starter set. But because I need an excuse to use this stuff as a tax write-off, woohoo! This is all the stuff I got from the Kickstarter. So I backed the $80 level because that's how you get the Mercenaries box, and also because the 4-inch Timberwolf is really cool. I also got some add-ons like the Blood Asp, my favorite Clan Assault mech, the Visigoth Aerospace Fighter, a box of Savannah Masters, obligatory 500 hovercraft, some gacha boxes that had a helicopter, tank, and griffin, a House Steiner dice tray, and some dice, all for around $160. And honestly, for all the stuff I got, it was really worth it. But in short, like Warhammer, get the mechs that you think look cool, because remember, you also gotta paint them. Another cool thing I should mention, since painting terrain is the bane of any Warhammer player's existence, is that Hextech makes pre-painted terrain for BattleTech. So that's honestly another win for BattleTech in my book compared to Warhammer, along with it also being much cheaper. So if that hasn't convinced you to already try BattleTech, let's talk a bit about the gameplay side. And because this is the only part of the video where I could naturally put this, it's time for some audience interaction to help boost it to the almighty YouTube algorithm. So maybe drop a like and subscribe please, because your support and engagement for this elaborate post of a channel only helps it grow and reach more Warhammer and hopefully now BattleTech fans. But let me know in the comments down below, so far even though I've only talked about the miniatures and pre-painted terrain, do you possibly have any interest in maybe giving BattleTech a chance, even if it's just getting a box of mechs? But anyways, let's talk about the gameplay side of BattleTech. BattleTech currently has 2 game systems: Classic, which is just the paper simulator that a lot of you probably have heard about, and have nightmares just thinking about it, and it's what's possibly keeping you from playing. But if you don't really vibe with Classic, you can also try Alpha Strike. So Classic BattleTech will always function off a hex-based movement system, and the use of the 2d6 to determine if you land hits and damage, along with which component locations you hit on the mech. So it's more of a lance versus lance, or star versus lance, or star versus star paper simulator, which honestly is really dependent on what battle value you play at, which is just the equivalent of the points value for Warhammer. Because you can choose from many different variants of mechs, each with their own unique armor values, weapons, and quirks to how they handle. For example, the good old Atlas has many different variants, each with its own special loadout that can perform different battlefield roles, be it a command mech, fire support, or just straight up punch you in your face. Then there's also everyone's favorite walking trash can, the Urban Mech, with many different variants, including one with artillery, so now you're everyone's problem. So an average game of BattleTech lasts as long as your average 2,000 point game of Warhammer, but unlike Warhammer, you get more customization and control over your units, since you have to keep track of your ammo and heat, because that then dictates if you can fire your weapons or move, because in Classic, everything, and I mean everything, generates heat. This heat system prevents mechs from firing all of its weapons into its targets and taking it down in one turn. That is, of course, unless you get a lucky crit. But yeah, also did I mention that unlike Warhammer, the movement, combat, damage calculation, and heat dissipation is all treated as if it was happening in real time. So you have to be tactical with how you position your units, and unlike Warhammer, that mini you spend hours painting will do damage, and it's not going down without a fight. Classic is honestly the way to play, and like Warhammer, the more you play, the faster games will go. For the second game system, Alpha Strike, it's a simpler and more streamlined version of the game that I feel is more comparable to Warhammer. Instead of the hex-based movement system, you now use a ruler. You still use the 2d6 hit or no hit system that takes movement and range into account like Classic, and Alpha Strike also allows for bigger games since they go by faster and are more streamlined than Classic. You use these cards which have all the things you need to play on it, like keeping track of armor and structural health, how far a unit can move, its battlefield role, damage range, critical hit demerits, and special rules it may have that are in the Alpha Strike manual. All of this may seem like a lot, but it's honestly not. I played a 3-man Alpha Strike game a while ago with everyone having 3 to 4 mechs each, and the game was finished in under 2 hours. But honestly, if it's a one-on-one, you can take a whole army now that vehicles are being made. So if you want to play a game that's somewhat similar to Warhammer but don't want to play Paper Simulator, try Alpha Strike first. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the miniatures and the game system. I know this isn't my usual Warhammer content, but like I mentioned earlier, I feel like Warhammer is getting a bit too tiring to keep up with at this point, because unlike Warhammer, the rules for BattleTech haven't really changed much over the decades. So you're not really missing much besides newer mechs and vehicle sculpts. I genuinely want more people to check out BattleTech. It's a great game. A lot of people know about it, but it's frankly underappreciated for what it is, which is a game with a rich history that is often overlooked by most tabletop wargamers. Because, let's be honest, Games Workshop would rather go under than reduce the price of the miniatures and post the rules online for free. But if you're interested in BattleTech, I recommend just picking up one of the starter sets and maybe a Battle Force box, because this game is vastly more affordable than any of GW's games nowadays. So anyways, if you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, hitting the like and subscribe button helps more than you think. And maybe let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the subject of today's video. If you want to show me some of your cool miniatures, be it BattleTech, Warhammer, or any other war game, I do have a Discord server. And if you want to get some live feedback on your miniatures, you can catch me live right here on YouTube and Twitch. I stream 3 to 4 times a week. But if you really want to support the channel, becoming a channel member also helps too, since it allows me to make up bullshit excuses to my parents about why I totally need to buy even more BattleTech. Anyways, I think you'll make more terrible financial decisions, so I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, being poor is a choice.